The air that week didn't just feel dry, it felt angry. Every blade of grass cracked like glass underfoot, and the sky itself seemed brittle enough to shatter. I'd lived through drought seasons before back when I was a firefighter, but this one was different. The county had issued a level 5 fire ban, no campfires, no grills, not even a spark allowed. And yet somehow, the homeowners association thought they knew better. They called it maintenance burning. I called it suicide with gasoline. My wheat field, the one I'd spent the last 10 months nurturing, was supposed to be ready for harvest that week. Instead, I watched it turn into a wall of flame set by the same people who fined me for having non-compliant soil color. They thought they could control the fire. They couldn't, because when the wind finally turned, it didn't blow my way, it blew straight toward their homes. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your area. I love seeing how far these HOA stories travel. And if you enjoy seeing karma deliver itself, hit that subscribe button. You won't believe how this one ends. They say a wheat field breathes when it's ready, each stalk rising and falling like a chest asleep. That week, my field was breathing in slow golden waves. 10 months of work had ripened into an ocean, the color of bottled sunlight, each head heavy bowing politely, as if to say, any day now. I know that look. I know that hush. It's the kind of silence you only get right before the combine sings. I'm Scott Morris, 54, retired firefighter turned small farmer by choice, stubborn by nature. I don't drink much, but when I do, it's usually black coffee on a tailgate at dawn, counting the beats between wind gusts and telling the sky what I want from it like it might listen. My world is uncomplicated, rows straight, irrigation lines, tight equipment maintained, records tidy, and for most of the year, people leave me alone. People accept the Cedar Ridge HOA that sprouted right up against my fence like a bad rash. They weren't always there. The land used to taper into a scrubby wash, and past that, a farmhouse that leaned like it was tired of its own weight. Then developers paved the wash, poured foundations, and named the place Cedar Ridge, even though the only cedar in the zip code is a plastic Christmas tree at the hardware store. The HOA came bundled with the stucco rules, fines, newsletters that read like sermons. Somewhere along the line, they elected Savannah Clark as president, a woman who smiles like a photograph and talks like a podium. I meet a lot of personalities in my head when I mend fences. Hers is the kind that leaves splinters. On Monday, a white SUV rolled up to my fence and parked half on half off the gravel I paid for. 2 women in identical polo shirts, logo over the heart like a badge, stepped out with clipboards. One of them, a stick of cherry lipstick in impatience, took a picture of my windbreak and frowned at the screen like the trees had insulted her. I walked over, lifted my hat, and said what farmers say when we're trying to be polite. Morning. The taller one turned out to be Monica Hale, HOA treasurer, pointed her phone toward the wheat and declared height variance. Wheat grows, I said. It's famous for it. It's over the fence line and creates visual clutter for adjacent properties, she replied as if reading a grocery list. The other woman scribbled visual clutter like she'd been waiting all week to use it. Adjacent properties move next to a farm, I said evenly. It's going to look like a farm. A third car arrived. Sleek, black, coiffed. Savannah stepped out like a news anchor walking into a story. She didn't waste time. Mr. Morris, we've received multiple complaints. The field is unsightly, and the dry grass presents a hazard. We'll be conducting a maintenance burn on the common strip this week, under controlled conditions, so you'll need to clear your boundary. Maintenance burn, I asked? We're under a level 5 ban. The county spelled it in bold. No burns, no grills, no bracelets with sparklers. The wind's a loaded gun. Savannah produced a smile that made my shoulders itch. We have it covered. Exemption for landscaping. Our contractor is certified. Let me guess, I said. Greenland Resources. A little quiver in her eyelid. We've had a productive relationship. I'll bet I said, tell your productive relationship that if they bring open flame within 50 feet of my wheat, the only productive thing that'll happen is paperwork. A lot of it. She pivoted to Monica. Document his refusal to cooperate. I pulled my phone, opened the county's PDF, and held it up. There is no exemption for open burn during a level 5. I confirmed this morning. I also sent your board a certified letter last Friday. You signed for it, Monica. Nice cursive. You don't get to pretend the law is a suggestion because the stucco needs a photo shoot. Savannah glanced past me at the field. The wind pushed a ripple through it. The heads flashed white gold and settled. She lifted her chin. We'll be in touch, Mr. Morris. They left behind hot tire marks and a flyer on my fence, titled Creating Harmony Through Consistency. I read it then, used it to shim the wobbly leg of my workbench. Best use it was going to get. By noon, the sun had the hard white edge it gets before the wind decides to rearrange counties. I checked the moisture at the roots just right. I walked the boundary, tightened a section of wire, and retaped the blue flags that kept the combine operator honest when the time came. I texted my daughter, Lily, who was at school. Heads look perfect. 3 more days if the wind behaves. She replied with a weed emoji and a heart, the modern version of a high five. At 2 o'clock, I heard the rattle of a utility trailer. Over the crest, a crew rolled in along the HOA's side of the fence. 3 men in bright yellow vests, and that particular brand of confident incompetence people wear when they think rules are for other folks. They started unloading burn barrels and propane like it was tailgate Saturday. I walked over slow as deliberate, slow as nobody can say you rushed a fight. "Afternoon, fellas," I said. "You planning to light those barrels today?" The oldest of the 3 40-something and sunburned jerked a thumb over his shoulder. "We just do what the lady says." "That lady's about to move you into a felony," I said. "You see this?" I held up the county PDF again. "No burn. None. No exception. You want a clear brush? I've got a mower and a rope. I'll pull it for you myself. But you light a flame next to my field, and I promise you a camera will be the least of your problems." The youngest worker kid with a patchy beard shifted from foot to foot. "We were told it's permitted." "By who?" "Trevor," he said. "Trevor Cole. He said HOA cleared it." "Trevor can tell the judge," I said, and turned the phone to camera mode. The red light usually does more than words. "Pack the burners. Do your trimming with metal, not fire." They hesitated. The kid started unscrewing a propane line like a man who suddenly remembered he left the stove on at home. The older guy cursed under his breath but backed off. They tossed the barrels into the trailer with the sulking thud of equipment that didn't get to be stupid today, and they drove away. That evening, I sent another email, attached the PDF again, CC'd the fire marshal's office and the HOA board, including Savannah. I included photos, barrels, tanks, the truck's plate. A clean subject line for the jury I hoped I'd never need: "Unauthorized burn prep observed on 6, under county ban." I printed copies and filed them in a manila folder labeled "If, When." Firefighters love contingencies. Retired ones marry them. Tuesday gave me a gift: sunrise sky-washed pink, like strawberries in milk. I took a long lap around the field, heads tight, stems proud. I ran the pump, checked for leaks, and listened to the happy hiss of water under pressure. On the HOA side, someone had laid a line of gravel, so new it still smelled like the quarry, and stuck little white flags that said "Restoration Zone," as if the ground were a patient in recovery. No crew, no barrels. I let myself breathe. At 10, I drove into town for diesel gloves and a spare belt for the auger because augers snap belts the way Mondays break plans. I was gone 90 minutes. When I turned onto my road, I saw a black scorch at the corner of the common strip 20 feet from my fence, a long oval of cooked weeds and gray ash like a tongue stuck out in mockery. Someone had lit something. Not a bonfire, the pattern didn't match, but a burn. A test. A dare. I parked in the gravel, walked to the fence, and crouched. Heat still radiated through the gravel. I pressed a knuckle to it and hissed, "Recent enough to be stupid, not recent enough for me to find who did it." A line of my drip tubing along the edge was melted into a sad, wrinkled grin. I followed the char into the HOA side and found a squash nozzle half fused to the dirt-cheap plastic, or a regulator someone dropped when the flame coughed. No apology note. No notice on my door. No call. I took photos from 4 angles and a short video narrating the date-time coordinates, wind speed from my little Kestrel, because detail wins fights. Then I called the number on the last violation notice the HOA had taped to my fence, the one about non-compliant soil color. It rang 6 times and dumped me to a voicemail that sounded like it had given up years ago. Savannah didn't answer her cell either. I left a message: "Even calm, Miss Clark. This is Scott Morris. Someone conducted open burn adjacent to my field within the last 2 hours. We're under a level 5. I've documented it and notified the county. Do not light anything again." I hung up and stared at the wheat. The wind stroked it like a cat testing a human's patience. I thought about all the small ways people justify big mistakes. It's cheaper, it's faster, we've always done it, no one will know. Fire doesn't negotiate with any of that. Fire doesn't care if the spreadsheet says you saved 30%. Fire cares about fuel and wind, and both were plentiful. When Lily got home, she found me rewrapping the melted line. She leaned on the gate, trying to read the weather in my face. "Bad, stupid," I said. "Which is worse? Stupid spreads. We should call the sheriff, she said. I already called the county, I answered. If I call the sheriff, the board prints a letter about harassment and hostile neighbors. Paper likes paper. We'll give them more paper. She shook her head. I hate that you have to play chess with people who can't read a weather map. I don't mind chess, I said. I mind people who think the king is a mirror. Night came with a smell I didn't like, hot weeds and plastic that had been too close to a flame. I laid out my turnout bag by the door anyway, goggles, N95 gloves, bandana, a coil of rope, one of my old fire shelters I keep because I am sentimental about the dumbest things. I checked the pump again and ran a test. Pressure was lower than I wanted. The shared line from the county road had been throttled for conservation. I made a note to pull from the holding tank if it came to it. Before bed, I stood by the fence and listened. You can hear trouble a mile away if you let yourself. I didn't hear anything except a dog bark and the hiss of water through PVC and a far-off freeway laying down its endless ribbon of regret. My field breathed. My field waited. I went inside, set my phone face up on the kitchen table, and left the manila folder next to it. On the cover, I wrote 2 words in black marker. If. When. I underlined when. Out the window, a porch light blinked on in Cedar Ridge like a warning or a wink. I couldn't tell. Maybe both. The air had that prickly feeling, the kind that makes the hairs on your arms stand up like the world's antenna is catching a station you don't want to hear. If tomorrow behaved, I'd be in the field at sunrise walking the first test strip with the combine. If tomorrow didn't, well, I'd been in rooms with worse odds than weather and won. But weather isn't a courtroom. Weather doesn't care about your exhibits. Weather, like fire, like arrogance, does exactly what it wants until something stronger tells it no. I switched off the light and told myself it would be fine. I didn't believe myself. Morning arrived without color, the kind of gray dawn that feels like a bruise spreading across the sky. I was up before the sun boots already crunching the gravel when the first light crawled over the ridge. The field looked fine at a distance, still gold, still proud, but the air told a different story. You can smell old smoke long after the flames die. It lingers like a lie that thinks it got away with something. I followed the fence line to where the scorch marks had been the day before. The ash was cooler now, but the ground still held that sickly sweet chemical scent, propane, and melted plastic. Whoever had torched it hadn't even bothered to rake the evidence. They just left it there like I wouldn't notice 20 feet of black in a sea of gold. Arrogance makes people sloppy. I crouched and brushed my fingers over the soil. Fine gray powder drifted off my gloves, caught the wind, and disappeared into the morning haze. There's a moment when anger turns into something sharper focus. That's where I was. I took more photos, set a marker flag, and began measuring distance from the ignition line to my property. 14 feet, 8 inches. Close enough that one gust could have turned it into a tragedy. I filed that number away. When I got back to the house, there was a voicemail blinking on my phone. Mr. Morris, this is Monica Hale from Cedar Ridge. We've received notice of your concerns. Please be aware the HOA is conducting authorized vegetation management to protect the community. Any claims of damage will need to be submitted formally. Her tone was the exact mix of smug and rehearsed I'd come to expect. Authorized. Protect the community. Code words for we did what we wanted and dare you to prove otherwise. I poured coffee black and bitter and wrote the timestamp on a sticky note, 0716 a.m., Monica Hale, admission of burn. Then I forwarded the voicemail to my email so it would live somewhere safe. The trick to fighting bureaucrats is to beat them at their own religion paper. By mid-morning, the wind had changed again. Small gusts rolled in from the south, carrying dry warmth that scraped against the throat. The weather app said humidity was down to 9%. The fire department had upgraded the warning from high to extreme. I couldn't help thinking that if Savannah had half the sense God gave a cactus, she'd have called her contractors off weeks ago. Around 11, my neighbor Pete Hanlon pulled up in his truck. Pete's one of those quiet guys who sees everything but says little. Retired mechanic, lives 3 parcels west. He leaned out his window, thumb hooked on the steering wheel. Morning, Scott. You see what they're doing behind the tennis courts? No, but I've got a bad guess, I said. They've got that same landscaping crew out there. Saw barrels again, and one of them was smoking. I sighed. They just can't help themselves. Pete nodded. My cousin works for the county. He says there's no permits on record for Cedar Ridge. Not one. That was all I needed to hear. Appreciate the intel, Pete. If the wind shifts again, you get your wife and dogs out first, you hear? He nodded solemnly and drove off, gravel popping under his tires. I went inside and pulled out my if, when folder. The thing was starting to look like a legal textbook. Inside were every photo, video, and certified mail receipt from the past 3 weeks. I made a new section labeled Witnesses and wrote Pete's name. Then I printed the transcript of Monica's voicemail and stapled it to the top. Organization was half the battle. The other half was patience, waiting for the other side to make the one mistake that couldn't be undone. I didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, a small white drone buzzed overhead. It wasn't mine. I keep mine grounded during high wind. I tracked it until it hovered over the HOA side about 30 yards up. A logo flashed on its tail, Cedar Ridge Safety Initiative. I almost laughed. They were filming their fire prevention project, probably to brag on social media about how proactive they were. I grabbed my camera and recorded their recording. Always record the recorders, that's another rule from my firefighter days. By 4 o'clock, the air was a furnace. The temperature had cracked 103, the kind of heat that hums. I stood on my porch, squinting at the horizon when I saw the flicker. Not flame, not yet, just movement. Heat shimmer, bending light wrong. Then I saw the workers again. 3 of them, this time, same truck, same vests. They were back behind the gravel line, unloading tools. This time, I didn't bother walking. I grabbed my phone, zoomed in, and started filming from the fence. The leader, older guy, gray at the temples, tilted a propane torch toward the ground. I saw the flash, a brief tongue of fire, then another. My voice was steady as I narrated. Time 16:37. Date August 17th. Unauthorized burn under County Level 5 ban. HOA contractor igniting flame within 20 feet of private agricultural property. They burned for maybe 2 minutes before one of them looked up and spotted me. The torch dropped fast. They scattered like pigeons, kicking dirt over the smoldering line, but the camera had already caught it. I sent the footage straight to the county fire marshal's office, subject line: ongoing HOA violations, Cedar Ridge. Within minutes, I had an automated confirmation email. At least someone's computer was paying attention. I walked the field again that evening. The shadows stretched long, thin as worry. My wheat was almost ready, the heads tight, bending low under the promise of yield. A week more, and I'd be harvesting. A week more, and all of this would have been behind me. But peace has a way of attracting people who can't stand to see it. I sat on the back porch, sharpening a sickle I hardly used anymore. The sound of steel against stone is calming if you've lived through sirens. The world quieted around me, crickets tuning up the faint buzz of power lines, the far-off laughter of kids from the subdivision. For a minute, I almost forgot there was a war brewing at the fence line. Then my phone dinged. New email. Subject violation notice. Property code 4.12. From Cedar Ridge, HOA, Mr. Morris. Our records indicate that your property contains overgrown and combustible vegetation in violation of community safety standards. Please address this issue within 48 hours to avoid fines or escalation. Cedar Ridge HOA Safety Committee. I read it twice, then laughed loud enough to scare a crow off the roof. They burned my property and now they were fining me for it. I hit reply. Dear Savannah, thank you for the notice. I'll be sure to include it in my official complaint to the county, which now includes photographic evidence of your contractors violating the fire ban within sight of your so-called safety committee. Sleep well. Scott Morris. I didn't expect a response. Bullies prefer monologues. That night, Lily sat across from me at dinner, pushing pasta around her plate. They're not going to stop, are they? She asked. No, I said. They think they can't be touched. Then what do? Same thing you do with fire. Starve it, contain it, and wait for it to eat its own fuel. She smiled faintly. You sound like Grandpa. Yeah, I said. He'd have hated these people. Outside, the wind rattled the windows like someone testing the lock. I didn't like that sound. I went to the shed, filled the tank of my water pump, and laid out extra hose lengths just in case. The forecast promised dry lightning in the hills, and dry lightning likes to share. I didn't sleep much. Around midnight, I heard engines on the HOA side, small ones like generators. I slipped outside in the dark barefoot on the cool dirt. Over the fence, I saw faint orange glows flickering low and shadows moving. They were burning again. Quiet this time, smaller piles maybe, but still flame. The nerve of it hit me like a slap. I raised my phone, recorded from the dark. The wind caught a bit of smoke and tossed it straight toward me. My eyes watered, and for a heartbeat, I was back on a wildfire line in 2007 ash, in my teeth radios screaming the sky, trying to crush us. The memory brought something sharp to my chest, something I hadn't felt in years, fear clean and cold. I retreated inside, called the county fire hotline again, and left a detailed message. I quoted the timestamp down to the second. Then I sent the footage. It wasn't anger anymore. It was inevitability. They'd keep burning until nature decided to finish what they started. At 3 a.m., the wind shifted. I smelled it before I heard it, a subtle change in direction, the scent of static. The Santa Anas had arrived early. They roared through the valley like a living thing, bending trees and slamming loose shutters. I stood on the porch and watched my wheat bend in one direction, then another, each stalk whipping under invisible fists. The sky flashed distant lightning, dry, silent, dangerous. Somewhere behind the ridge I saw the faintest red glow like a cigarette tip on the horizon. My stomach dropped. That glow wasn't lightning. I grabbed my old turnout coat, jammed on boots, and ran for the truck. The wind howled past my ears, carrying the sound of crackling from somewhere too close. When I rounded the bend toward the eastern fence line, I saw it flames creeping along the brush, eating their way toward the field, exactly where the scorch marks had been. The HOA's last little maintenance burn had come back to life. Son of a, I gunned the engine, raced to the water pump, and fired it up. The pressure gauge trembled barely above half. Not enough. I ran the hose anyway, spraying the edge of the fire line, but the wind laughed at me, tossing embers into fresh tinder. The flames hissed, retreated, then came back angrier. From the far side, I could hear shouting voices from the HOA district, maybe the contractors, maybe Savannah herself. I couldn't make out words over the wind, but I heard panic. It was the sound of people realizing too late that control was an illusion. Lily appeared at the porch in her robe, phone in hand. "Dad," she yelled. The wind look, I looked up. The embers weren't drifting north anymore. They were arcing west, straight toward the HOA. The fire I'd been fighting for hours finally found new fuel. And this time, it wasn't mine. It started with a sound I'll never forget, a low, guttural moan rolling across the valley like the earth itself, exhaling after holding its breath too long. That's how the Santa Ana winds announce themselves. No warning, no mercy, just a hard slap that rips the quiet right out of you. By the time I made it back to the porch, the wind had turned vicious. My wheat field bowed in waves under its force, like a sea of terrified dancers trying to escape the flame line advancing behind them. From the ridge, I could see it clearly now, a long shimmering wall of orange devouring the slope behind the HOA's maintenance area. The fire was alive, snapping, snarling, moving fast. Every gust pulled it forward 10, 20 yards at a time. I'd been through firestorms before, but this was different. This wasn't a random lightning strike or a spark from some drunk camper. This was man-made arrogance being answered by physics, and the fire had just found its revenge. "Dad," Lily shouted from the porch. The fire's at the fence. I sprinted back toward the pump, praying the water pressure had built up. The gauge still hovered low, but it was all I had. I yanked the hose, aimed at the fence line, and opened the valve. A thin jet sputtered out hardly enough to wet the dust, let alone fight a fire. I swore under my breath, then turned toward the field. Flames licked the base of the wheat, now feeding hungrily on dry stalks. They spread faster than a man can curse, 5 feet, 10 feet, 15. The wind howled louder. Sparks spiraled upward, carried toward the very houses that had been built too close to my land. "Lily, get to the truck," I yelled. "I'm not leaving you now." She hesitated for half a heartbeat, then ran. I could hear her shouting into the phone, 911, I hoped, but even that felt like shouting into a storm that didn't care. I grabbed a shovel and started digging, creating a break trench where the wheat met the burned grass. It was a hopeless gesture, but I needed something to do, anything to slow it. Sweat poured down my neck, stinging my eyes. My lungs filled with smoke. The wind shifted again, blowing hot ash straight into my face. And then, like some cruel joke, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it at first, but it kept vibrating. When I finally looked, the caller ID made me laugh. Cedar Ridge HOA office. I almost didn't answer, but some dark curiosity won. "Scott Morris," I rasped. A frantic voice crackled over the wind. "Mr. Morris, this is Savannah Clark. There's a fire spreading from your field. The entire ridges." I cut her off. "You mean your burn pile? The one I told you not to light?" she stammered. "We were trying to control it." "Control," I barked, coughing. "Savannah, the only thing you control now is which way you run." I hung up before she could answer. The phone buzzed again seconds later, but I didn't bother. Behind me, the fire had already breached the trench. I backed away, pulling my coat over my mouth. The field was lost. No point pretending otherwise. All I could do was make sure it didn't reach the house. I ran the hose along the porch and soaked the siding, the deck, the grass. The pump groaned in protest. The air was a blur of sparks and dust, a storm of light and fury. Somewhere behind the roar, I could hear the wail of sirens, still far too far. Then came a new sound: explosions. not massive but sharp and ugly like gunshots cracking through the night. I turned toward the subdivision and saw them HOA maintenance trucks, the same ones I'd filmed earlier, now burning on the curb. Propane tanks in their beds went off like fireworks. One of them rocketed into the air, trailing sparks before it smashed into a street lamp and blew it out. For a moment the neighborhood vanished behind smoke. Roofs disappeared. Only the glow remained pulsing, like the heartbeat of something monstrous. I stood there numb until Lily grabbed my arm. Her eyes were wide-streaked with soot. "Dad, we have to go. The wind's pushing it back this way. I'm not leaving the house." She shook her head hard. "It's just a house. You can rebuild it." But she didn't understand. That land wasn't just soil. It was my father's, my grandfather's. Every fence post, every line of irrigation was a story, a memory. Leaving it to burn felt like abandoning them all over again. Still, I knew she was right. The fire was a predator now, and we were in its path. We ran to the truck, the air thick enough to chew. I turned the key, engine caught, thank God, and we tore down the gravel road toward the county highway. Through the mirror, I saw my field erupt in full flame, a roaring orange wave that rolled straight through the wheat and leapt the ditch. And then something miraculous, or maybe poetic, happened. The wind turned again. Not by much, just enough. The fire shifted direction, veering northeast right into Cedar Ridge. The same wind that had carried embers toward my land now dragged them back across the manicured lawns, the decorative fences, the houses with perfect beige siding and no trespassing signs hammered into gravel. "Dad, it's going into the neighborhood," Lily whispered. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Watching it felt like staring into a dream you didn't want but knew had to happen. We parked by the old irrigation reservoir up the hill and got out, keeping low against the wind. From there, we could see everything, the flames racing down the HOA's main street, Sycamore Lane, where Savannah's house sat like a crown jewel. Sprinklers sputtered to life, pathetically spraying mist into an inferno. The fire found the cedar fence's first cheap, untreated wood and ate them like kindling. It jumped from yard to yard, igniting synthetic decks and propane grills. One spark landed on a row of SUVs, and within minutes the entire cul-de-sac was a river of fire. I could see silhouettes of people running, some dragging hoses, others clutching pets or boxes. A few cars tried to flee headlights, cutting through smoke, but visibility was gone. The fire had become a moving wall, alive and furious. Savannah herself appeared at one point, recognizable even from a distance by her red blazer, now half torn, half glowing in the light. She was yelling at someone, waving her arms, trying to coordinate as if HOA bylaws could order the fire to comply. But the flames didn't care about her authority. They swallowed her perfect landscaping, her ornamental fountain, her entire illusion of control. I watched as the clubhouse roof caved in sparks, shooting skyward like fireworks on the 4th of July. For a long moment, all I felt was silence inside. Not triumph, not revenge, just silence. Lily touched my hand gently. "Are you okay?" I nodded slowly. "I warned them, Lil. I did everything right. I filed the papers, made the calls, sent the letters. They didn't listen. They never do," she said softly. Down below, the fire engines finally arrived, sirens howling through smoke. Crews jumped out, dragging hoses, shouting commands. Water hissed against the blaze, but most of it turned to steam before it hit the flames. The wind was too strong, the heat too fierce. I saw one firefighter stumble near a hydrant and recognized the shape of his helmet, the same design I'd worn 20 years ago. For a heartbeat, I almost ran down to help, but Lily stopped me. "Dad, you've done enough." She was right again. We stayed there until the horizon started to dim. The sky, once orange, faded into a sick gray blue. The fire began to lose its fury, eating what fuel it had left. What used to be Cedar Ridge was now a sprawl of blackened outlines. Only chimneys remained pointing upward like accusations. When the last flare died, the valley went utterly still. No wind, no sound, just the smell, the thick, choking reminder of what pride costs. Lily leaned her head on my shoulder. "It's over," she whispered. "Not yet," I said. "They'll still try to blame us." She looked up. "But you have proof." "Proof doesn't always matter," I said quietly. "But this time, maybe it will." As we drove back toward the house, the first droplets of rain began to fall, tiny, warm, almost apologetic. The storm that could have saved everything came too late, as it always does. It hissed against the cooling ashes, little puffs of steam rising where drops met ruin. When we pulled into the driveway, the front yard was coated in soot, but the house stood. The pump still ran, stubborn as its owner. The air smelled of smoke and metal, and something faintly sweet, the strange perfume of burned wheat. Lily stepped out and stared toward the ridge, where faint lights from the fire crews blinked through the mist. "Do you think they'll rebuild?" she asked. "Some will," I said. "Some shouldn't?" She looked at me confused. "What about Savannah?" I exhaled slowly. I think tonight she learned what control really looks like. I didn't say the rest, that the only thing you ever control in a fire is what you lose first. The next morning, when the county trucks rolled through and the reporters showed up, they found me standing by the fence again, just like always. My field was gone, yes, but my house stood, and the truth was about to stand with it. The fire that destroyed my crop hadn't just burned my land, it had rewritten the balance, and the story of Cedar Ridge was only just beginning. When the dawn finally came, it didn't look like morning. The light was wrong, pale orange, bleeding through a haze that felt too heavy to be fog. The world smelled like a burnt nail, my throat ached, and every breath carried the taste of iron and ash. From my porch I could see it all. My wheat field, once gold and full of life, was now a black desert, ridges of cracked soil, the ghost outlines of where irrigation lines had run. A few stubborn stalks still stood charred, but upright, like soldiers who hadn't realized the war was lost. For a while I just stood there, coffee in hand, letting the steam mingle with the smoke curling off the ground. The silence was the worst part. No birds, no insects, not even the sound of the wind that had started it all. The fire had burned away noise itself. Lily stepped outside, wrapped in a hoodie 2 sizes too big. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed red from smoke and sleeplessness. "Is it really over?" she asked softly. "For us, maybe," I said. "Not for them." I nodded toward the ridge where the HOA subdivision had been. A column of gray smoke still rose from that direction, twisting lazily into the brightening sky. Every now and then, the wind would carry faint voices, firefighters shouting, engines, revving, someone crying. The radio on the porch crackled with local news. The Cedar Ridge community suffered extensive damage overnight, as strong winds reignited embers from a previous controlled burn. Preliminary reports suggest the original fire began on HOA-maintained property. Multiple homes are confirmed, destroyed. I turned it off. I didn't need to hear the rest. I'd lived it. Around 8, a white pickup pulled up the driveway. Logan Pierce climbed out, same old worn jeans, clipboard under one arm, camera around his neck. He'd spent 30 years as a county fire investigator before retiring, but once a firefighter, always a firefighter. "Jesus, Scott," he muttered as he looked over the field. "It's like a damn war zone." "Yeah," I said, "and the enemy never even knew they were in one." He crouched, sifted some ash through his gloved fingers, then shook his head. "Burn pattern's clear. It started over that fence line, no question. You can even see where it jumped, the heat's different on your side." This was fresh oxygen feeding old embers. "I told them it would happen," I said quietly. "You told everyone," he replied, "and I'm going to make sure the county knows that." He took photos for a good half hour, marking ignition points and direction of spread. When he finished, he pulled a folded form from his back pocket and handed it to me. "Official witness statement," he said. "You write it in your words, I'll sign as verification. You'll want to keep a copy for the county fire marshal. I already called him, he's sending a team this afternoon." I stared at the paper for a moment. The top line read, "Incident origin suspected human negligence." I wrote the date, time, and one simple sentence: I warned them this would happen. Logan nodded. Short, clear, and true. That's all they'll need. By noon, the investigators arrived, 3 county trucks with fire marshal decals and a 4th from the sheriff's department. The lead was a tall man in tan uniform, broad-shouldered, with a nameplate that read, "Mark Grant." I'd met him years ago on a wildfire near Big Bear. The kind of man who didn't say much because he didn't have to. He shook my hand firmly. "Scott Morris. Heard you've been through hell. Twice, actually," I said. "The first time when they lit it. The second when they blamed me for it." His jaw tightened. "We'll see about that." They spent the next few hours combing through what was left. They measured burn patterns, took soil samples, cataloged debris. When they reached the HOA side of the fence, they found what I'd expected: melted propane caps, half-burned barrels, and a line of fuel stains leading back toward the maintenance lot. One of the deputies whistled. "Looks like someone poured gas to make it start faster." Mark crouched beside the stains and sniffed. "Accelerant, no question." He looked back at me. "You said you warned them multiple times. Emails, certified mail, voicemails. I even sent drone photos." "Good," he said. "Keep all that ready. We'll need it." Just then, a car pulled up fast, the kind of speed guilt travels at. Out stepped Savannah Clark, still in that same red blazer, though it was stained with soot now. Her hair was wild, her face streaked with smoke, but her tone hadn't lost its edge. "Mr. Morris," she snapped, "I hope you're proud of yourself. Your negligence destroyed half our community. Mark straightened immediately. Ma'am, this is an active investigation. You're not authorized to. She cut him off. I'm the president of Cedar Ridge HOA. I am authorized. This man refused to maintain a proper fire barrier. His overgrown wheat field, I laughed, sharp and humorless. Lady, you burned a field of green wheat and managed to torch your own homes. Congratulations. Savannah's lips trembled, but she pressed on. We had permits. The fire was contained until Mark held up a hand. No, ma'am. You had nothing. County records show 0 permits issued to Cedar Ridge HOA this month, and we've already confirmed ignition points inside your property. If I were you, I'd stop talking. That shut her up. For a moment anyway. I turned away before my temper got the better of me. The last thing I needed was to be the headline that distracted from the truth. By evening, news vans lined the highway. Reporters with perfect hair pointed microphones at the smoldering remains of Cedar Ridge, narrating phrases like community tragedy and unforeseen disaster. None of them said what really mattered, that it was all preventable. Logan found me leaning on my truck, staring at the black horizon. Word's spreading fast, he said. The story's already on Channel 7. They're calling it the HOA Firestorm. Catchy, I muttered. Almost sounds like a bad movie. Except this one's got evidence, he said, handing me a flash drive. Drone footage from one of the neighbors. Caught the crew lighting up last week. You can even see Savannah's car parked right there. I took the drive, turned it over in my hand. It felt heavier than metal should. You think the county will actually charge them? Oh, they will, Logan said. Between the burn ban, property damage, and reckless endangerment, they're cooked. The only question is, how high up it goes. I nodded, staring back toward the ridge where the HOA's houses once stood. The smoke was thinner, now curling like whispers against the setting sun. It wasn't satisfaction, I felt just exhaustion. Lily came out carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She handed one to Logan and the other to me. I talked to some of the neighbors, she said quietly. They're furious at the HOA. A few are already calling lawyers. Good, I said. The more voices, the harder it is for Savannah to twist the story. Do you think she'll try? Lily asked. I smirked. People like her always do. They'd rather rebuild the lie than face the ashes. That night, the investigators wrapped up their work. Mark Grant approached me before leaving. Scott, he said, we'll file the preliminary report tomorrow. You'll get a copy, but between us, it's clear cut. The HOA violated county law, started the fire, and then failed to contain it. They're liable for everything that burned, including your field. I nodded slowly. Appreciate it, Mark. He hesitated a second, then added, you did everything right, you know. Some folks would have taken matters into their own hands. Yeah, I said, glancing toward the black horizon. And that's the difference between revenge and justice. One burns fast, the other burns long. When the trucks pulled away, the night grew quiet again. I sat on the porch with Lily, neither of us speaking for a while. The sky above was streaked red and gray, and the faint smell of smoke clung to everything, the kind of smell that lingers in your clothes no matter how many times you wash them. Finally, Lily broke the silence. What now? I took a long sip of coffee, feeling the heat steady my hands. Now we make sure the truth doesn't burn out with the fire. Think they'll ever apologize? She asked. I chuckled. Savannah. She'd rather set herself on fire than admit she's wrong. We sat there until the stars came out, tiny pinpricks of clean light above a dirty world. I thought about my father and how he used to say every fire has 2 sides, the one that destroys and the one that clears the way for something new. Maybe he was right. Maybe the land, like people, sometimes needed to burn before it could grow again. As the last of the smoke faded into the night, I looked out over the blackened field and whispered, "You'll grow back. Stronger this time." Behind me, the phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. Subject: legal notice pending. Sender: Cedar Ridge HOA Legal Counsel. I smiled. The war wasn't over yet, but for the first time I knew which side the wind was on. By the next morning, Cedar Ridge was swarming with uniforms, clipboards, and cameras. County fire marshals in yellow vests walked every inch of the burned perimeter, marking ignition points with red flags that looked almost cheerful against the black ash. Deputies from the sheriff's office stood at the cul-de-sacs, keeping curious residents back behind tape. Every few minutes, a drone hummed overhead, scanning the wreckage from above. From my side of the fence, I watched it all unfold, like a man studying a battlefield he hadn't meant to win. The news vans had multiplied overnight. They lined the street like vultures, logos from KCN News, Fox 13, even Channel 8 Sacramento, all broadcasting the same looping footage: burned houses, melted cars, and my name scrolling across the bottom of the screen, in white letters. Local. Farmer claims HOA ignored fire ban before blaze. Lily brought me a print copy of the Maple County Chronicle, still smelling of fresh ink. The headline hit me like a hammer. Cedar Ridge HOA, under investigation, after unauthorized burn triggers wildfire. Underneath it, a photo showed the ruins of Savannah Clark's prized house chimney still standing, her once white Tesla melted into an unrecognizable puddle of aluminum and glass. I traced the edge of the picture with my finger. Justice didn't always come fast, but sometimes when the wind was right, it came hard. At 9 sharp, Mark Grant from the fire marshal's office pulled up again, this time with 2 investigators and a county records officer. He waved from the truck. "Morning, Scott. You got a minute?" "Always do," I said, stepping off the porch. He handed me a thick folder. "We finished the preliminary analysis. Wanted you to see it first." I opened it carefully. Inside were photos of burn progression, ignition mapping, and a 1-page summary stamped confidential in bold red. Primary cause, open flame ignition, originating within HOA-maintained property along east boundary line. Secondary acceleration due to unapproved use of propane and diesel accelerants. Violation of County Ordinance 142.6, burn ban enforcement. Responsible entity Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association, represented by President Savannah Clark. I exhaled. "That's it then," Mark nodded. "It's enough to trigger civil and potentially criminal charges. The county attorney's already reviewing, and they know I filed the warnings. Oh, they know. Your email chain's attached as Exhibit A," he smirked. "You document like a lawyer, Scott. Most folks just yell and hope someone listens." I chuckled. "Fire taught me 2 things. Respect for rules and the patience to let stupidity burn itself out." He grinned. "You're about to see both pay off." Behind us, a county photographer snapped pictures of the melted HOA signage that once read Cedar Ridge Community, a harmony of living. Now it just said Cedar Ridge, a harm. Before the letters warped into blackened plastic, somehow that felt perfect. By noon, Savannah herself appeared again, this time flanked by 2 lawyers in crisp gray suits and a public relations consultant who looked like she'd stepped out of a commercial for bottled water. They didn't look at me when they passed. One of the attorneys was on the phone barking something about mitigating liability exposure. Savannah's eyes caught mine for half a second, and I could see it, the brittle mix of fury and fear, the realization that her title didn't mean a damn thing anymore. Later that afternoon, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Morris, this is Detective James O'Donnell with Maple County Sheriff's Arson Task Force. You got a minute, depends who you're calling for." "For yourself," he said evenly. "We'd like to schedule a statement regarding the HOA incident. Not as a suspect, relax, but as the complainant." I agreed to meet him at the county building the next day. Before hanging up, he added, "Bring copies of everything you filed before the fire, emails, photos, certified receipts. We'll want originals too." "Don't worry," I said. I've been preparing for this day since the first burn barrel showed up. That evening, the neighborhood was ghostly quiet. No laughter, no dogs barking, no cars passing. The air still carried the sour tang of burnt vinyl. Across the road, a few surviving residents shuffled through debris, wearing N95 masks and disbelief. I watched one man, a young father, pull a half-melted bicycle from the rubble of his garage. He turned it over in his hands, the handlebars sagging like wilted flowers. His wife just stood beside him, holding their daughter, both staring as if trying to convince themselves it wasn't real. Lily stood next to me on the porch, arms crossed. "They didn't deserve this," she murmured. "No," I said softly, "but they followed the people who did." She frowned. "Do you think Savannah will ever admit fault?" "She'll admit nothing until her lawyer tells her it's billable." The next morning I arrived at the sheriff's office right on time. Detective O'Donnell was a stocky man with the calm voice of someone who'd heard every lie known to mankind. He led me into a conference room, set down a recorder, and hit the button. "Mr. Morris, for the record, please confirm your role in the events of August 17th. I'm the property owner adjacent to Cedar Ridge HOA. My wheat field borders their eastern maintenance area. I filed 2 written complaints and 3 emails warning about open burning during a county fire ban." He nodded. "And these are the copies." I slid a folder across the table, chronological with tracking numbers. He flipped through the papers slowly, his eyes narrowing. "You even attached the fire marshal's bulletin from that week. That's good. That's airtight. I learned from my old job. I used to run suppression teams back in the day. Knew what a burn ban means." "Yeah, I saw that on your file," he said. "Firefighter. Explains a lot." He paused, then added quietly, "You're not going to like this part, but I need to ask. The HOA's attorney is claiming your field contributed to the spread of the fire, lack of defensible space, overgrown brush, that sort of thing." I smiled thinly. My field was green wheat, not brush. It had irrigation lines running that day. They can spin whatever story they want, but I've got satellite data showing soil moisture. You can't ignite something that's alive and wet. He nodded approvingly. "Good answer. You'll be fine." He closed the folder and leaned back. "We've interviewed 5 witnesses already, neighbors, contractors, even a landscaper who worked under the HOA. One of them mentioned Savannah ordered her crew to speed up cleanup before the inspectors come snooping. Does that sound right to you?" "It sounds exactly right," I said. "And she didn't mean inspectors, she meant me." O'Donnell cracked a grin. "Guess she got her inspection anyway." 2 days later, the county issued its official press release. It hit the news like a thunderclap. Maple County Fire Investigation finds HOA at fault in 1200-acre blaze. Officials have determined that the Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association violated multiple county fire regulations by conducting unauthorized burns during an NEPC active Level 5 fire ban. The association faces potential charges of gross negligence, property destruction, and violation of emergency safety orders. The statement included a quote from Fire Marshal Grant. "This incident was entirely preventable. Multiple documented warnings were ignored. The fire did not start by chance, it started by choice." That one line replayed on every local channel for days. Within 24 hours, Savannah's lawyers tried damage control. They released their own statement, claiming a misunderstanding of procedural authorization and insisting that no willful misconduct occurred. But the drone footage leaked that same night courtesy of someone in the investigation team, and it told a very different story. You could see the crew laughing as they lit dry brush. You could see the barrels marked flammable. And you could see Savannah's red SUV parked 10 yards away. The internet did what it does best. By the next morning, hashtags like #HoFirestorm, #BurnBanKaren, and #JusticeForScott were trending regionally. I didn't ask for fame, but I wasn't about to waste it either. I sent the footage along with my full statement to every journalist who'd covered HOA abuse stories in the past year. If Cedar Ridge wanted to bury me under paperwork, I'd bury them under truth. 3 days after the report went public, a county summons arrived in my mailbox. Official notice that I'd been named as the primary witness in an upcoming civil suit, the County of Maple versus Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association. As I read the letter, Lily walked up, still holding her morning tea. "What's that?" "It's the next chapter," I said, folding the paper neatly. "The one where they finally get what's coming." That afternoon, I drove back up to the ridge. The land was quiet again, still scorched, but starting to show the faintest hints of green pushing through the soot. Nature never apologizes, but it always rebuilds. Down in the valley, Cedar Ridge looked like a painting someone had erased, the symmetry gone, the perfection burned away. For the first time in months, I didn't feel angry, just certain. Certain that whatever came next, I'd stand through it the same way my field would burn, but unbroken. I turned back toward the truck and whispered to the empty air, "Savannah, you wanted control. Well, you're about to learn what it feels like to lose every inch of it." And as I drove home, the wind picked up again, but this time it felt clean. The day the county lawsuit went public, everything changed. It wasn't just the smell of smoke that lingered anymore, it was tension raw and sharp as barbed wire. Every local station replayed clips of the firestorm, the burning cul-de-sacs, the panicked HOA board members, the ash swirling like snow over million-dollar homes. The footage played on a loop until it became its own form of justice. For once, the headlines didn't twist the truth. HOA firestorm negligence, and cover-up exposed President Savannah Clark, under fire literally and legally hero farmer, documented warnings weeks before disaster. They called me a hero. I didn't feel like one. Heroes save things. I'd watched mine burn. Still, the public wanted a face for the story, and I was it. My phone didn't stop ringing. Reporters, lawyers, neighbors, even strangers offering donations to rebuild. But all I wanted was quiet. By midweek, Savannah Clark finally spoke. She stood in front of the charred remains of the HOA clubhouse, wearing a black dress and a face that had forgotten how to fake confidence. Cameras flashed. Her voice trembled only slightly as she read from her prepared statement. "Our hearts go out to the families affected by this tragic incident. We deeply regret the damage caused by this unforeseeable accident. The Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association acted with the best intentions and within our understanding of county safety procedures." That was as far as I got before turning off the TV. Unforeseeable accident. Best intentions. The same hollow phrases bureaucrats always used when they were cornered. Outside, the late summer sun beat down hard enough to make the air shimmer. I was mending a section of melted fence when a car pulled into the drive, a Silver County sedan, clean official, and carrying a man with purpose written all over his posture. He stepped out and extended a hand. "Mr. Morris Detective James O'Donnell Arson Task Force. We met briefly last week." I wiped my hands and shook his. "You found something." He nodded. "More than something." We walked the fence line together, as he explained. The investigation had uncovered internal HOA communications, emails, meeting notes, even text messages. Turns out, Savannah and her vice president, a smug insurance adjuster named Darren Lowe, had pushed for the controlled burns to cut landscaping costs. They'd even bragged in one message about saving the HOA $10,000 a month on brush clearing. But the real smoking gun, he said, was a recording a 37-second voice memo recovered from a contractor's phone. He played it for me right there on the spot. "We'll light it up tonight while the wind's calm. Just keep it contained by the fence. If it gets close to Morris's property, we'll blame his overgrowth." "He's always filming anyway, say he made it worse." Savannah's voice. Calm, deliberate, unmistakable. For a moment, all I could do was stare at the horizon. My hands clenched around the fence wire until it bit my palms. "She planned it," I whispered. "She did," O'Donnell said. "And now we have her voice admitting it." He slipped the phone back into his pocket. "The district attorney's office is preparing criminal charges. Negligent arson, property destruction, falsifying safety documents. This isn't just civil court anymore, it's criminal." "Good," I said quietly. "About damn time." Word spread faster than wildfire ever had. By the next day, every media outlet from Sacramento to San Diego was covering it. The internet dubbed Savannah the HOA pyromaniac. Memes flooded social media, one of her photoshopped as the Statue of Liberty, holding a flaming torch that said HOA permit. I didn't laugh. None of it brought my field back. Still, it was satisfying to watch the mighty crumble. Then came the unexpected letters from homeowners who'd once ignored me, even mocked me now, asking for forgiveness. "Scott, we should have listened. I'm sorry for doubting you. My house is gone, but I want to help you rebuild." Forgiveness is a strange thing. It can't grow in fresh soil. It needs ash, regret, and time. I didn't reply to most of them, but I kept the letters. Every apology was another seed planted in burned ground. 3 nights later, I was closing up the shed when I saw headlights pause at the end of the drive. A lone SUV idled there for a long moment before the door opened. Savannah. She stepped out slowly, eyes sunk in hair pulled back tight. No camera crew this time, no PR handler, just a woman whose empire had turned to smoke. She stood by the mailbox, arms crossed as if afraid to come closer. "I shouldn't be here," she said softly. "You're right," I said. "I just wanted you to know." She swallowed hard. "It wasn't supposed to go that far." I laughed bitterly. "Fire never stops where you want it to." Her eyes glistened, but her pride held steady. "I didn't mean for anyone to lose their homes." "No," I said. "You just meant to teach me a lesson. Make the troublesome farmer comply." She flinched at that, shoulders tightening. "You think I wanted this, I think you wanted control," I said. "You lit a match to prove you could. And you found out control burns both ways." For a long moment, the only sound between us was the hum of crickets. Finally, she whispered, "They're going to destroy me." I stared at her. "Savannah, you did that yourself." She turned away, walking back to her SUV without another word. The taillights faded down the road, red against the black horizon. Lily came out a minute later, arms folded. "Was that her?" "Yeah." "What did she want?" "Forgiveness, maybe." "Did you give it?" I stared at the dark road. "Not tonight." The next morning, my phone buzzed with another update from the county. The district attorney had filed formal charges against Savannah and 2 other HOA board members: reckless endangerment, destruction of private property, and conspiracy to falsify safety permits. Bail was set at $200, $000 each. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a sliver of peace. Not joy, not triumph, just balance. But peace is a fragile thing. That evening, a letter arrived in a plain white envelope, no return address, just my name typed neatly on the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You're tearing this community apart. You've made enough enemies, Morris. Let it go before something else burns." No signature, no clue who sent it. Lily read it over my shoulder. "You think it's Savannah, could be one of her cronies," I said. "People who still think the HOA was some kind of religion. What are you going to do?" "Keep every threat," I said. "Every word. Paper's the only thing that doesn't lie." 2 days later, the public hearing began. The courthouse overflowed with reporters and residents. I sat in the front row beside my lawyer watching Savannah walk in wearing a beige suit and that same blank mask she'd always worn during HOA meetings. She avoided my eyes. The DA laid it out methodically, the illegal burns, the ignored warnings, the forged permit requests, the voice recording. Exhibit after exhibit hit the projector until there was nowhere left for her to hide. When the audio clip played in full, the room went dead silent. Even Savannah's lawyer dropped his pen. "We'll light it up tonight while the wind's calm." When it ended, the prosecutor simply said, "No further questions." Savannah didn't look at anyone. She just stared down at her manicured hands like they didn't belong to her anymore. Afterward, outside the courthouse, a reporter shoved a microphone toward me. "Mr. Morris, how does it feel seeing the people responsible face justice?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "It doesn't feel good," I said. "It feels necessary." That quote ended up everywhere: TV, newspapers, online posts. People called it powerful. To me, it was just the truth. That night, Lily and I sat on the porch watching the stars push through the haze. The land was still dark and scarred, but life had started creeping back. Tiny green shoots poked through the black soil where wheat once stood. "Look," Lily said quietly. "It's growing again." "Yeah," I murmured. "It always does." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "Do you think they'll rebuild Cedar Ridge?" "Maybe," I said. "But it won't ever be the same. Once you've seen your own walls burn, you don't build them the same way again." We sat there a long while listening to the crickets, watching the moonlight glint off the new green. The air was cooler, now softer. For the first time in months, it didn't smell like fear, it smelled like rain. Somewhere out there, Savannah was waiting for a verdict. I didn't wish her harm. The fire had already done that. All I wanted now was for the truth to finish what it started, to burn away everything false, until only what mattered remained. And maybe when the ashes finally settled, we'd all see what was left worth saving. The trial began 6 weeks later, but the story had been burning across the state long before that. By the time Savannah Clark stepped into the courthouse, she wasn't just a disgraced HOA president, she was a symbol. Every news station called it something different. The fire that humbled the powerful, the HOA inferno, the blaze that burned the bylaws. For me, it was still personal. I wasn't there for headlines. I was there for the orchard my father never got to see again, for the field that had fed my neighbors for years, and for the promise that stupidity and arrogance wouldn't be allowed to masquerade as authority anymore. The courthouse itself looked old enough to remember the Great Depression stone walls, creaking wooden doors and ceilings that turned every whisper into an echo. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and nerves. When I walked into the courtroom that first morning, Savannah was already there. She wore gray this time, no more red blazer, no more self-importance. Her lawyer, Michael Trent, stood beside her, sharp suit, slick words, dead eyes. Behind them sat 2 other former board members, Darren Lowe, the insurance adjuster, and Marcy Hill, the treasurer, who'd approved the payments to the fake landscaping company. The judge, Honorable Claire Winslow, entered with a face carved from patience and exhaustion. She was known for handling wildfire and environmental cases. I'd read about her fair, relentless, allergic to excuses. I liked her already. The DA, Rebecca Lane, started strong. She was young, maybe mid-30s, with the kind of calm fury that burns hotter than shouting ever could. She began with a single sentence that silenced the room. "This fire didn't start in the grass, it started in an office." Then she laid it out piece by piece. Emails, budget, cuts, the meeting minutes where Savannah's voice could be heard, saying, "We'll handle it quietly." Next came the drone footage, the same one Logan Pierce had given me. It played on the courtroom screen, like a movie no one wanted to star in. There was the burn barrel, the crew laughing, the spark that started everything. The jury watched in absolute stillness. When the clip ended, Rebecca turned to them and said, "This isn't nature. This is negligence, wearing a name tag." Savannah's lawyer countered with what lawyers always do: deflection. He claimed the HOA had verbal clearance from a county contact that the fire's escalation was due to unpredictable winds, and that I, Scott Morris, had failed to maintain adequate defensible space. He even called me reckless for provoking the HOA with constant surveillance. When he said that, Savannah actually nodded. I leaned toward my lawyer, Lacey Turner, and muttered, "You think it's too late to install sprinklers in my patients?" Lacey smirked. "Don't worry. Their house of lies has dry timber. Let them keep lighting matches." When my turn came to testify, the courtroom felt smaller. Every camera lens seemed to hold its breath. Lacey gave me a nod before I took the stand. "State your name for the record." "Scott Morris." "Occupation?" "Retired firefighter, farmer, father." "Tell the court." "Mr. Morris, what did you see in the days leading up to the fire?" I told them everything. The first scorch marks, the ignored warnings, the emails I'd sent, the voicemail from Monica Hale claiming an authorized maintenance burn. I explained the wind patterns, the moisture levels in my field, the way the flames jumped because of dry brush the HOA had refused to clear. Then Lacey played the voicemail Savannah had left that night, the one where she accused me of negligence while the fire was still spreading. The jury's faces hardened as they listened to her, words echo through the room. "Your field's on fire, Mr. Morris. You need to take responsibility." When it ended, Lacey asked, "How did that make you feel?" I paused, "Like watching someone crash your car, then hand you the bill." There was a faint chuckle from the back row, quickly silenced by the judge's gavel. Lacey smiled slightly. No further questions. Savannah's lawyer tried to shake me during cross-examination. "Mr. Morris, you admit your property contained flammable vegetation. Everything in this county contains flammable vegetation," I replied. "Even your briefcase if you get close enough to Savannah's torch." The courtroom erupted in laughter. The judge tapped her gavel once, but I caught the faintest twitch of amusement in her eyes. Trent scowled. "You think this is a joke?" "No," I said. "I think it's a tragedy pretending to be an HOA policy." By the time he sat down, his notes looked like confetti. The most damning testimony came 2 days later. The county investigator Mark Grant took the stand with the confidence of a man who had nothing left to prove. He presented chemical analysis reports showing traces of propane and diesel in the HOA's burn area, accelerants consistent with industrial landscaping equipment. Then came the recording, the one O'Donnell had played for me by the fence. The moment Savannah's voice filled the courtroom again, she visibly crumbled. "We'll light it up tonight while the wind's calm. Just keep it contained by the fence." You could have heard a pin drop after that. The judge turned to Savannah's lawyer. "Any objections?" Trent adjusted his tie. "No, Your Honor." For the first time, Savannah looked at me, not defiant, not angry, just hollow. I almost pitied her. Almost. By the third week, the defense had run out of oxygen. Every lie they'd built their case on had gone up in metaphorical smoke. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood tall and steady. "We, the jury, find the defendants, Savannah Clark, Darren Lowe, and Marcy Hill, guilty on all counts." Savannah's jaw clenched. Marcy started crying. Darren stared straight ahead as if he still believed he'd wake up and find it was all a bad dream. Judge Winslow read the sentence without ceremony. For gross negligence, resulting in property destruction and violation of emergency safety orders, this court sentences each defendant to 2 years in county custody probation upon release and restitution to the affected property owners as determined by civil review. There was no cheering, no applause, just the quiet shuffle of justice being done. Outside, the cameras swarmed again. Reporters shouted questions, microphones thrust in every direction. "Mr. Morris, do you feel vindicated? Do you forgive the HOA? What will you do now that you've won?" I stopped long enough to give them one answer. "I didn't win," I said. "We all just stopped losing." That line went viral within an hour. People called it poetic. I didn't mean it to be, it was just the truth. That night, back at the farm, the silence felt different. Not the heavy, suffocating silence of smoke and regret, but something lighter. Lily sat beside me on the porch, sipping tea. The moonlight washed over the field, blackened but alive in its own quiet way. "Does it feel over?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "Justice isn't the same as peace." She nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think she'll ever change, Savannah? I stared out at the horizon where Cedar Ridge used to glow with porch lights and manicured perfection. Now it was just shadow and ruin. "People like Savannah don't change," I said. "They just fade until no one remembers what they were fighting for." Lily leaned against my shoulder. "And you? What'll you do now?" I smiled faintly. "Rebuild. But slower this time. Fireproof, maybe. And not just the buildings." She smiled too, and for the first time in months, I heard her laugh soft and real. Above us, the night was clear. No haze, no smoke. Just stars, honest and distant, like reminders that everything eventually burns away except what truly matters. As I watched them flicker, I thought of my father's old words, "Fire reveals character." He was right. The fire had shown Savannah her arrogance, shown the HOA their hypocrisy, and shown me something I'd almost forgotten: resilience. You can lose everything and still come out standing. You just have to let the flames do their work and not follow them down. And as the wind picked up gentle this time, brushing across the black soil, I whispered into the night, "All right, old man, the field's yours again. But we're planting smarter this time." Somewhere deep in the dark, a single cricket answered. Maybe that was enough. The verdict should have been the ending, but life doesn't wrap up in neat court transcripts. When the gavel came down, it didn't erase the ash or rebuild the houses. It didn't bring back the golden wheat or my father's old orchard. It just left a silence wide, strange, and waiting to be filled. 2 months after the trial, the county sent me a check restitution from the HOA's insurance, though it barely covered half the damages. Money can't buy back decades of work, but it can buy lumber, irrigation lines, and seed. So that's what I did. The first morning of the replanting, I stood in the middle of the field with Lily beside me. The ground was still blackened in places, but shoots of green had begun to pierce through. We'd spent weeks clearing debris, turning soil, and digging trenches for water flow. The smell of fresh earth replaced the ghost of smoke. "Feels weird," Lily said, pushing her hands into her pockets. "Starting over in the same place, everything ended." I smiled faintly. That's what land is for. It forgets faster than people do. She looked around, squinting at the horizon. "You think the neighbors will come back?" "Some," I said. "The ones who learned something will. The rest will sell and move on, find another HOA that promises perfection." "Perfection doesn't exist," she said quietly. "Exactly," I replied. "But maybe community does." A week later, the county held a community forum in what used to be the Cedar Ridge clubhouse site. The walls were gone, but someone had set up a tent and folding chairs. The ashes had been cleared, replaced by a few picnic tables and wildflowers planted by volunteers. The sign out front read, "Cedar Ridge Community Renewal Meeting Open to All." When I arrived, the crowd surprised me. Dozens of former residents were there, some whose houses had burned, others who'd barely escaped the flames. Many still wore the look of disbelief that lingers long after disaster, but there was something else in their faces too: determination. At the front of the tent stood Deputy Grant and a few county officials. He spotted me and waved. "Morris, you made it. Wouldn't miss it," I said. He turned to address the group. "Folks, what happened here was preventable, and it's our job to make sure it never happens again. That's why we're working with residents to rebuild safely and transparently. No more closed-door meetings, no more self-appointed rulers. This time, the community decides." The crowd murmured approval. Someone raised a hand, a woman in her 50s, soot-stained jacket, sharp eyes. "Does that mean no more HOA?" Grant smiled. "That's up to you. But if you ask me, I'd say the last one already fired itself." Laughter rippled through the tent, the first genuine laughter I'd heard here in months. Then someone from the back shouted, "Let Scott speak." I froze. Heads turned toward me, and before I could refuse, Grant gestured to the mic. "Go on," he said quietly. "You've earned it." I stepped forward slowly, heart pounding. Public speaking had never been my thing. I preferred tools to microphones, but sometimes the truth deserves a voice. "I'm not a politician," I began, "and I sure as hell ain't a leader. I'm just a guy who spent 20 years fighting fires, and another 20 trying to keep one from starting. I did everything by the book. Filed reports, sent letters, raised alarms. But nobody listened until the smoke hit their porch." A few people nodded grimly. I don't say that to gloat. I say it because we keep building communities like we build fences, to separate, not protect. We let rules replace responsibility, and somewhere along the way we stopped being neighbors. I looked out across the crowd, faces tired but alive. When that fire came, it didn't care about bylaws or boundaries. It burned everything the same. But after it, I saw something worth saving: people, helping each other without fines, without threats, without needing permission. That's what community is supposed to look like. I paused, letting the silence settle. So if you're rebuilding, don't rebuild walls. Rebuild trust, rebuild common sense, rebuild something that can't burn. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the clapping started, soft at first, then stronger until it filled the space like wind through trees. I stepped back, a little embarrassed but relieved. Grant leaned over and whispered, "You ever run for office, I'll vote for you." I chuckled. "Not a chance. Paperwork catches fire too easy." In the months that followed, something incredible happened. Without an HOA breathing down their necks, people actually started working together. The empty lots that once held manicured lawns now sprouted vegetable gardens and fruit trees. The county helped install a shared water line, and local volunteers built fire breaks and irrigation ditches that would have made my father proud. Even the media came back this time for the right reasons. They called it the rebirth of Cedar Ridge. Lily helped organize a youth gardening program. She called it Ashes to Acres. Every Saturday, kids from nearby schools came to plant trees and learn about fire safety. I watched her teach them how to dig proper trenches, how to recognize dry soil, how to listen to the land. One afternoon, she caught me watching and said, "You're proud, aren't you?" I shrugged. "Maybe a little. You're teaching them something. Even the adults forgot respect." She smiled. "Well, someone had to." One day I got a letter from Savannah. Not an email, not a statement through lawyers, a real handwritten letter folded neatly inside an envelope. The return address was a correctional facility 2 counties over. I hesitated before opening it. Scott, I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to tell you I finally understand what you meant about control, about fire, about things that spread faster than you can stop them. I lost everything trying to keep power I never deserved. But I read about what you're doing now, about the rebuilding, the kids planting trees. I'm glad someone like you was there to fix what people like me broke. If you ever replant that wheat field, save 1 row for me not to own, just to remember. Savannah Clark. I read it twice, then folded it back carefully. I didn't forgive her, not fully. But for the first time, I believed she meant it. By autumn, the field had come alive again. Rows of young wheat stretched across the land, glimmering green and gold under the sun. Every time the wind blew, it rippled like water, the same wind that once carried fire, now carrying life. We held a small harvest celebration, nothing fancy, just neighbors, folding chairs, and music. Someone brought lemonade, someone else baked pies. The laughter was real this time, not forced by HOA, social events, or mandatory attendance. As the evening faded, Lily stood on a hay bale and raised her glass. To what fire tried to take and what we took back, the cheer that followed carried through the valley. I stood a little apart, looking at the field. A year ago it had been a graveyard. Now it was breathing again. Logan Pierce wandered over, hands in his jacket pockets. You ever think you'd see it like this again? Didn't dare hope, I said. Guess hope's like fire too, all it needs is a spark. He grinned. Careful, coming from you, that's a loaded metaphor. Maybe I said, laughing softly. But it's true. When the last of the guests left and the stars began to prick through the sky, I walked to the center of the field. The air was cool, the wheat whispering like old friends. I knelt, scooped a handful of soil, and let it run through my fingers. The ground was soft again, forgiving. For the first time in a long while, I felt something that wasn't anger or grief. It was peace. Not the quiet kind, but the earned kind, the kind that grows out of ruin and sweat and stubbornness. I thought of my father, of the orchard he'd loved, of the lessons he'd drilled into me. Respect the land. Listen before you act. Fire's not evil, just impatient. He'd been right. Fire had taken everything from me, but it had also cleared the way for something better. I stood, brushed the dirt off my hands, and looked out across the reborn valley. We're good, old man, I said softly. We're finally good. The breeze picked up, bending the wheat in slow rolling waves. For a second, it almost looked like the land nodded back. That night, before turning in, I wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done in years. Fire took our fences, but it gave us roots. We built walls to keep order, and they burned. We planted seeds to keep hope, and they grew. Maybe that's the difference between control and care. One owns, the other nurtures. I closed the book, set it on the table, and turned off the light. For the first time since the fire, I slept without dreams. If this story taught me anything, it's that justice isn't about punishment. It's about rebuilding what arrogance destroys. The HOA burned my field trying to control nature, but nature reminded all of us who's really in charge. The lesson: don't let power make you forget your place in the world. Fire doesn't care about titles, and truth doesn't care about excuses. We all get burned eventually. What matters is what you grow from the ashes. If you've made it this far, tell me where you're watching from, and drop A in the comments if you believe karma always finds its way. Don't forget to subscribe. The next story might just start with a spark.